Okay, so to pick up where we left off in the last tutorial, we are going to go ahead and take this simple object that we've unwrapped, and we're going to do a little bit more prep work in order to send this on to either Photoshop or Substance Painter, or just work in-house in BodyPaint. And so we're going to start by going with working in-house in BodyPaint, because that's going to be the stepping stone to do Photoshop as well. Okay, so we're going to switch over to paint mode in order to start thinking about painting these objects. So let's go ahead and click on paint. And when we come over here, you'll see that the tools change pretty dramatically. You can actually see these look a little bit more like tools you would see in Photoshop or Illustrator or any sort of imaging program. And then I have my viewport here, but I want you to note that there's actually tabs here. There's just one other tab, which is my Texture UV Editor tab, which is basically a big version of that little window that we were looking at earlier. And so I have these two views and some tools available to me. The tool that I'm most interested in right now is the one that's going to allow me to make this paintable. Right? Currently, it says that I can paint it, but if I click and drag on this surface and I have this brush tool selected, absolutely nothing is happening. And that's because we need to use the paint setup wizard in order to make this essentially have a material or a texture that we can paint onto dynamically in real time. And to do that, we come up here to this icon right here. It's called Paint Setup Wizard, surprisingly enough, and it's got like little stars, little sparkles, puts a little shine on everything. So let's go ahead and click on that. As soon as we do that, we get this pop-up window. And if we had more than one object in our scene, including lights and cameras and everything else, this list would be populated with all the items in our scene that are capable of being painted. And so, that's really useful because sometimes you have a bunch of objects that are comprising like one big model. And you want to be able to paint all of those. And so being able to just do this in a single shot is great. And when you do that, oftentimes you can basically choose whether you want this to be single material. So you could have multiple you could have a model that's got, several different pieces and parts, like a character with, maybe it's a simple character, but it's got like clothing on, skin tones, things like that. And you want to be able to do that all as one single material. Right, so you have one texture instead of a whole bunch of texture files to deal with. That's another one of the really powerful things about the Paint Setup Wizard. In our case, we're keeping it simple. So we want to say object. We're not worried about materials. We don't have any materials right now. And I want this. This is what tells it to either use this or not use this. Right, and you can also say select all, deselect all. Like if you had a bunch of stuff, you could say deselect all, and then you could say, okay, I just want this one item to be selected. All right, so we're going to go ahead and hit next. Now, by default, recalculate UV is checkmarked, right, which is going to automatically generate some UVs. Now, if we're using body paint, those UVs are probably going to be totally fine. If we're taking this into Substance Painter, those UVs will probably be totally fine, or we can use Substance Painter's in-house UV generation software to generate UVs for us. But if we're taking this into Illustrator, we could, I guess, but into Photoshop, it can oftentimes be problematic because it's sort of randomly dispersed in all directions, right? And so if I was to and it's not totally random, but it's just chopped up in a really strange way, especially if it's a more complex mesh. And that can be confusing as an artist trying to paint or do something on those things, because they could just be like all over the image. All the different UVs could be kind of spread out in weird ways. And so it's best in our case, because we've already done the hard work of unwrapping this, to uncheck recalculate UVs. We are going to leave this in single material mode because it shouldn't matter. And we're just going to go ahead and click next. And when we do this, we're going to come to this list of different channels that we can create. And so by default, this is somewhere around like 50% gray. I just went ahead and boosted it to white so that the lines that I'm going to make later stand out. And what's nice is that it keeps whatever you've set your values to for the next time around. But when you're doing a demo, it's kind of hard because, right, then all these things were set to different values than what you're going to be seeing on your screen if this is your first time using these tools. And so, okay, so this is kind of the default setting, except this should be gray. So you can just double click on this or click on it once and just drag this up and make it 100% white for our uses today. And you'll see there's all these other channels, right? These channels all map to the channels in the legacy material system in Cinema. However, what all that these are is basically it's asking you, do you want to create a texture file, an external texture file, a TIFF, PNG, PSD, whatever it is, for each one of these channels, or which channels do you want a PNG that you can, or sorry, a PSD or TIFF, which is usually the default, that you can go in and edit and manipulate, right, and then save, or not. And what's nice about these all being texture files instead of something procedural is that then we can just go into Redshift and create a texture node and make the, the file that gets generated by this color field into the color channel, right, on our Redshift material. Or, we could go down to reflectance, which is similar to reflection, right? Transparency is similar to opacity. Displacement is displacement. Normal kind of fits. Normal and bump are similar. Bump is basically in the old system like a black and white height map, and normals are the RGB height maps. Okay, so let's just keep it simple. We're going to stick with color for now. We're just going to do something really flat. And then we're going to go ahead and change these values. I typically tend to make the minimum value the same size as the maximum value. And that's because I had some issues at some point where it kept making like strange dimensioned textures, and I was like, no, I just want these to be square. And this is a way that I found to make sure that they stay square. So we're gonna set this, and I'm doing 4096 by 4096. That is the number of pixels, and it's a good amount depending on, right, if I'm gonna be reasonably close to this model in any way, shape, or form, I want this to be a pretty high, a high resolution image. Okay, so then you just click finish. And unless there's an error, this is basically what you get. It'll tell you which materials it output. It's going to tell you what the material is called, dimensions, and what channels it has, and all of that. And you'll notice as soon as that changes, now when I'm hovering over this model, I have a paintbrush. And if I'm hovering off in space, I have the nose symbol. That means I can paint on these surfaces. Okay. So we've done that. So yay, we've got this material. Now, right, as I said, we can paint on this surface. I can just click and drag, and for some reason it is not working at all. And why is that? Okay, so I'm not sure what just happened. I don't know. I might leave a little bit of that in there. I say some swear words, but the Cinema was not working. There was a bug, and when I was drawing on the surface, it was doing really strange things. But then I switched over to my UV editor, right? Drew a line like you would expect it to draw, and I came back. It looks fine, and now my brush is working as it's supposed to, right? So, so this is basically how you get it ready for body paint. We're not going to go into body paint too much right now. I will have a separate tutorial that kind of covers that, just as a tool for working. As I said, like I'm not a master of using BodyPaint. I use it sometimes and it's really highly effective for certain things that I'm trying to do. But if it's anything more complex or there's a little bit more of a challenge, it's just easier for me to work in Photoshop. And actually, I'm really enjoying Substance Painter too. So I'm starting to use that more, again, depending on the use case. Okay, so yay, I've made some strokes in here, but what we're really going to need to do at this point is let's go ahead and I'm going to delete some of this. If you want to keep some line work on your objects, go for it. But I'm going to go ahead and save my file now. And when I do that, it's going to ask me if I want to save the texture of the project. The texture of the project is the texture that we're painting on right now, and depending on what is up, we can see the name of that texture file. We're not going to worry about the name right now, but we'll just hit yes. And then we're going to go, and if we go to layers, this is where this layers menu is for layers in our image file, right? And our image file here is mat_color_0.tiff, right? That's the file that we've generated and that we just saved when we went to save the project. Now, one of the problems, and something that happens very frequently with beginners and people that aren't familiar with Cinema 4D or programs that reference other files but don't actually like embed those other files, such as this referenced texture file that is not part of the Cinema 4D file, is that you will go to move to a different computer or send a file to someone else, and they open it up and all the materials are just pitch black. And that's because these images, these TIFF files or whatever other types of image files or textures you have in your scene, did not move with the project, right? You sent your project file, but all your assets, all the things that you need in order to flesh this thing out, were not available. And so Cinema has a simple way to make sure that you package all of that up. And even if you had, like, say, an image of Bob Ross in your downloads folder and images of trees in your, like, I need nature tonight folder, you could bring all of those together using a single command. And so to do that, we just go up to the top of the screen, we go to File, we go down to Save Project with Assets. And this is going to help. This helps for actually two reasons, but we're going to go ahead and say Save Project with Assets. We're just going to leave all of the defaults as they are. There's not a whole lot of defaults. There's not a whole lot of settings for this. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And what that's going to do, it's going to pop up a save dialog. I'm going to go ahead and call this UV demo ready for sharing. UV demo. I'm just going to say UV demo ready. And so I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And once I do that, if I go to my hierarchy and I go to this folder and I then say, you'll see that now my project UV demo ready actually has a folder called UV demo ready. And if I open that up, there is my project folder. And then there's this folder called text. And text currently has one texture in it, which is my color channel, right? If I was to generate more textures or if I had used other textures in other scenes, it would aggregate all of them here in this one folder. Now, additionally, and aside from just sharing and sending this to other people, if you happen to be moving computers, like maybe you work on your laptop some, you work on a desktop computer some, what the other thing about this format does is that it basically makes sure that these files are still visible to Cinema 4D when you open the file on a different computer, right? If they're in other places, then Cinema will typically do the full file path is how it accesses that image. And so if you're on your Mac, that file path is going to be very different than if you're working on a Windows desktop the next day. Or, there may be some other reason, or even if it's just another Mac, the names of the users might be different, the file structure is going to be a little different, and it will lose it. And so you'd have to go back and relink everything. Whereas this, ideally, makes sure all of those links stay active and live and makes your life happier. Okay, so that was my rant about saving with assets. So please do that. It makes life so much easier for you, especially if you're working on a shared computer and there's a potential chance you could lose the textures you've done so much work to. Okay, so we've got this set. Now, what if I say I'm much more comfortable in Photoshop, or there's certain tools or things that I want to use Photoshop to do. And so I want to export this to Photoshop. Now, the issue is right now, I have this background layer, and this background layer is completely white, right? I have no idea where in this square these different polygon surfaces are going to be, where my UVs are going to be laid out on here. I mean, I vaguely know where I put them, but I don't have any direct knowledge of that. However, fortunately, there's a very simple way to make sure that we can actually create a layer that has all of our edges in it so that we can see where the edges are in another program, and we can do our artwork based on the outside dimensions of the different polygon islands. So what we need to do is we just come up to our texture UV editor over here underneath our view, and we go to layer, and then we go down and we just say create UV mesh layer. As soon as I click on that, you'll see in this case I'm getting these extra little triangles, and that's just a residual part of the process of creating these. But now, if I go back to my primary view and I make sure that I don't have Gerard shading lines on, I just have Gerard shading on, you'll see that I actually have lines, right? That along every seam, there is an edge now. So now I have a system so I know where all of my polygons are going to be, where I can apply my textures to make sure they're in the place that I want them to be at. And I should be in good business. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. Yes, I do want to save that. And now that I've done that, I can go ahead and go into Photoshop and I can open this file up. Now I may already have, actually I have a leaf up for a different tutorial. Oh, I think I have one version of this up, but we can go ahead and close that. And let's go ahead and we just go to File, and we're just going to go ahead and say Open. And then I'm going to go ahead and go and find this folder, C4D tutorials, scroll down to UV demo ready, go to text, and go here. I also want you to note that you'll see there's this backup folder is here that's generated as well. Now that backup folder is because I have Cinema 4D set to be saving the file automatically every 5 minutes. And so that's why it creates this backup folder, is to drop those saves in there. So I'm going to say, okay, I've got this file. I'm going to open it. And hopefully you can see these on your screen, right? They're very fine lines. But so now I can see the outlines of all of my shapes, and you'll note that's on its own layer. So I can very easily create a new layer. And if, I could be painting on the background, but I can put this between the background and under my UV mesh. And I could have this UV mesh blend in different ways or whatever, but we're just going to leave it at default. And then I'm going to go ahead and go to my paintbrush. And let's say, I could be bringing in images here or whatever, but let's just say this is like a white box with like reddish, rusty corners or something like that. Because I've got this like orange, rust, red looking color here. And so I'm going to use two different brushes to do this. First, I'm going to lay down the color in some of these places with my brush here, and I'm just going to keep going and just do a little bit of something here and something over here. And then I'm going to use this Kyle's Concept brush to actually go in and start to kind of smear this around. Because, right, Photoshop's really great, honestly, at making, somewhat painterly and more expressive colors, which I always struggled with the other one, with BodyPaint, to have quite the same control that I do here, right? And obviously, if you have a trackpad or a mouse or whatever, you can go ahead, or not something better than a mouse, you can work with that. But right? You get the idea. I've made some changes here. I've added some texture to this. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. Now there may be a faster way to do the next step, which is to reload this file so that we can view it. And I'm going to go ahead and test and see if I can actually make it a little faster. But so I've made my changes there. Maybe before I go too far, maybe I'll add a little bit more color somewhere else on here and maybe shrink this brush head down a touch. And just do a little bit more scribbling just so we have something. And then I don't know if Kyle's splatter brush, oh, it's actually going to splatter it. Oh, that's fun. Kyle, you make such good brushes. All right, so then we'll just go ahead and smear around here a little bit more. Okay, maybe blend these things a little bit together on this edge here, just so we can see what that looks like. Okay, save it, and let's go back to Cinema. Now in Cinema, what we want to do is we want to update the texture that's here, right? Obviously it has not updated. And so it'd be great if they had a setting here that just allowed you to update that. And I checked on view, it's not there, right? There's a lot of places where I wish it was, but unfortunately it is not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and open up my Material Manager. I do want you to note, once you start using BodyPaint and or you've generated a texture using the wizard, your material looks a little bit different, right? If I pop this open, currently we just have this color matte, but if we had reflectance and a bunch of other channels, each one of these would have the different layers. You can actually draw on two layers at the same, or two channels at the same time. It's pretty awesome. Right, but so there's nothing even here that really allows me to do this. Right, I can't, I was hoping there was some place in one of these menus where they had added something that would allow me just to reload this material quickly, but unfortunately that is not the case. So what I need to do is I just double click on this icon and I go to whichever channel I'm working in this case it's color. And if I go to texture and click on this little down arrow button right here by the word texture between the name of the file and just go down to reload image and hit yes, then it will update it with my settings. Now the thing I was going to see is if I can actually do this method here. That does not seem to work. Let's see if I can do it here. Can I bring that? Nope. Okay. I was hoping sometimes there's certain things where you can just drag an attribute out into the main window and it will just hang out there and then you can click on it and use it like a button and that works great. But unfortunately for reload image, that's not a possibility. So, okay. So there, right? We've been able to go in and edit this in Photoshop and make some changes to the color channel of this material. And then we could always, pop back into Photoshop and be like, oh, I need, I don't know, some other, oops. I don't know why the eyedropper is selected right now, but it's driving me crazy. Stop. Oh. I know why, because I double clicked and didn't see the window popped up. Okay, I am exhausted. All right, so let's say I want some blue in here. Let's go ahead and actually use a brush that can give us blue paint. Maybe we'll use a mixer brush and really start messing with things a little bit, right? That's not quite the blue that I was hoping for. All right, oh, there's some splatter. Look at that, gorgeous. All right, so I can make some updates. I can save it. You get the idea. I can come back in here. I can click on this arrow and just say reload, right? It's not the end of the world that I have to click buttons like that, but this does allow me to really start to see how this works. Now, one of the other things we'll need to do is we need to be able to make this a Redshift material as well so that we can use the Redshift engine, right? Because this is using the standard render engine. And there's several ways that we can do that. One of the easiest is we could just go ahead and create a new material. We are in redshift mode already. So we've created this material. We can double click on here. We can double click over here. We can type TEX, make our texture, connect this to our color node, and then go to our folder here and go and find, right, our, oh, this is the wrong one. Let's go back here and scroll down a touch and go to UV demo ready, text, color, open, and that will eventually update. There we go. And then if I go to my objects, I'm going to temporarily just delete the material off of here, the one that we've been editing, and I'm going to go ahead and drop the redshift material on there. And you'll see it looks a little bit, it doesn't look quite so nice in the preview, but if we were to go to our redshift render engine, I'm not sure why redshifty is not currently showing up. Oh, maybe I just have too many of these open and I've saved that. Oh, still too many. Oh, well, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to go ahead and open the render view. So we can open up our RS render view, and this is actually a preview of using what's it called? Using Substance Painter. Okay, right, so now I'm rendering this in render view. You can see the texture is applied. It actually looks really great on that surface. If I zoom in a bit, we can see right, just how nice that 4096 texture is. We're getting a lot of like really nice splatter. We were able to control exactly where we wanted things to go on the surface. There's a lot of complexity and color and everything, and we just have a ton of control over this, right? And I do still have the edges on. You can see those being rendered there. Obviously, I can just turn the visibility of that layer off, and then it would work just as it should. Okay, so that's how we take the UV unwrapped object and we bring it into either BodyPaint or use it in Photoshop. In the next little quick tutorial, we're going to see how we take this from Cinema and bring it into Substance Painter, and do all the things we need to do in order to create things in that surface.